smaller version, but it's back up, along with a couple of other revolutionary flags. The Don't Tread on Me flag, the one with the crescent moon and the Liberty, that is also a Revolutionary War flag. So it does kind of seem that there may be some people who are hoping that that is what they're going to have. You know, that coded language of 1776 and all the insurrectionist flags that we've seen. So now more than ever, we need your support, because we are your voice for the separation of church and state. So without any further ado, we're going to be talking to Dianne Post today. She's a board member with Secular AZ. She's a well-known attorney throughout the Valley and does all kinds of work on civil rights issues and human rights issues. So she's going to kind of break down for us today what this decision that came out this morning means and what it means for people who are seeking abortion care. So go ahead, Dianne. I'll be quiet now.
Well, what I'm going to talk about is, I haven't even read the decision yet, so I can't really talk about the decision yet. What I am going to talk about is the law in Arizona. What law is in effect, because there's been a lot of misinformation about what the law is, and then also the legal challenges that are coming, that are here and are coming. So what the law is right now is that the Arizona State Legislature passed that SB 1164, the 15-week ban. That does not go into effect until 90 days after the legislature closes. Well, they have not closed yet. So it's 90 days from the day the legislature closes that goes into effect. There may be a legal challenge to it, but they couldn't file it because we had to wait and see what this Dobbs decision was going to be. So there may or may not be a challenge to that, but it is not in effect. So there are the two, we do not have any trigger laws. So abortion is not illegal this minute in the state of Arizona. We do have the two laws from the territorial days and old days. We tried for decades to get these eliminated from the books, and we were unsuccessful. Both have been on an injunction. There's an injunction against them that was put on in March of 1973. They cannot go back into effect automatically, so they do not. That injunction would have to be lifted through a legal action. And those two laws that they are not in effect because of the injunction is 3603, the one about providing an abortion, and 3605, the one about advertising for an abortion. So those have an injunction. Now, there are two other laws that have since been passed by the legislature that are also blocked by an injunction or a partial injunction. Now, the 2014, we had the injunction against the 20-week ban. Back in 2014, it wasn't 15-week ban, it was 20-week ban. It was enjoined. That's been enjoined since 2014. It is not in effect, and it cannot go into effect again because it has the injunction. Now, last year, they passed the adding a genetic condition to the reasons for which you may not have an abortion. We had earlier challenged when they added race to that provision of the law, and we lost that at the Ninth Circuit. We are now in the middle of challenging the genetic condition addition to that particular statute, which is 3603.02. And it is at the Ninth Circuit. We won at the district court level, and it is enjoined. So it is stopped. So that provision of that law, only that one provision of that law is not in effect. It is enjoined, and it is at the Ninth Circuit awaiting oral argument, briefing and oral argument. So it's enjoined. Now, there are two laws that remain in effect, and they are both in the healthcare arena. Neither one of these things ever happened. One is the partial birth abortion ban. You remember when that was passed? I mean, there is no such thing, and there never was, but that's what they did. And then the other one is you can't abort a viable fetus. Again, something that never even happens. Those are the only two laws that currently are in effect. Now wrong. There's one more. There was one that we passed in 2021 in which the legislature said that that we have to make all our laws with the attention to the unborn fetus. However, it doesn't apply to IV fertilization, because remember the big brouhaha about, well, we got to be able to have, IV fertilization for those people who want to to have a child. So they made that exception. Well, that law was challenged. It's at the Ninth Circuit, but there is no injunction. So it is still in effect, but it is also challenged and at the Ninth Circuit. So that is the actual state of the law in Arizona. Now, there's the law, and then there's the reality. And Jeannie and I were just at a meeting where the reality is that because we have such a aggressive and retaliatory attorney general who has been known and has filed many cases in the past that have absolutely no legal basis to them, but he files them for political purposes in order to get attention. There is a great fear that he will do that. So abortion has stopped in Arizona because of the fear of criminal prosecution, not because of the actual law. But the actual law hasn't stopped Brnovich, and it hasn't stopped Maricopa County Attorney, and it hasn't stopped some of the other attorneys who have filed actions when there's absolutely no basis in fact or law for that action. We've seen that, 60 Trump cases, no basis in fact or law, and they just kept filing them. And of course, the doctor then ends up with a huge bill and paying a lawyer, even though they might win, but it ties you up and all of that sort of thing. So abortions have stopped, but not due to the actual law, but due to the fear of how this law will be used against people. And this is just the beginning. Several things that we talked about at a meeting I was yesterday was the issue of digital surveillance. There are some pros and cons. Now, 50 years ago when this law passed, there was no such thing as a medication abortion, but today 40% of the abortions are done by medication. So in some sense, that makes it easier and safer because you can get these medications by mail and other kinds of things, and buy them on Amazon and things like that. So that is positive. But on the downside, 50 years ago, we didn't have this kind of digital surveillance of us. So there was stories about women who were using a Google app to track their periods. No, bad idea. Don't be doing that. And also to look up abortion information. Don't do it on your phone. They'll track you. Go to the library and use the free computer services at the library to look up the information you need. Or get someone like me who is well past the childbearing age who will do this. There's also been a movement amongst women who are past their childbearing ages to stockpile some of these needed resources, because if we order it and they're going to come and ask me, what do you need it for? Well, I'm going to tell you it ain't none of your business. And certainly it's not to have an abortion, that's for sure, because no such thing could occur. So the digital surveillance is a huge issue. And there were some discussions, as I said yesterday in a meeting that I was in, about, shutting off your apps and leaving your phone in a, home when you go somewhere else, and all kinds of things that you have to be extra careful of. So there's work being done on this issue by the digital surveillance groups. Another thing that's happening, and just this morning I read about California trying to make themselves a sanctuary, is issues of extradition and privacy of your records. So let's suppose that a Arizona woman goes to California and has an abortion. Would Brnovich try to extradite that doctor back to Arizona to try him or her? Of course he would. And there are such evil people like that. So the whole issue of making this, so that you can't extradite people for this, and likewise, would they be able to extradite a woman from Arizona because she had gone to a state where it wasn't legal or had done something that wasn't proper in that state? So there's an issue of making those kinds of laws on a state book so that people cannot be extradited into or out of the state for getting health care. The other thing is the privacy of records. And you have to be very, very careful about your online records. Practically everybody's got access to them. I mean, really. And a medical doctor talked about the fact of how they're having classes about what to put in these records so that they're not triggering criminal investigations and criminal prosecutions of either medical professionals or the person who are seeking medical care. So these are all legal issues that are ongoing. I mean, they've all started. There was a discussion this morning also on KJAS about, with two different lawyers, about how this was going to go on forever. I mean, the litigation will go on endlessly, because there'll be the criminal litigation, there'll be civil litigation, constitutional litigation, and all that sort of things. So the other issues is a lot of the free speech issues have been coming up. Some of the states, for example, Utah, and even the Arizona 15-week ban says that you cannot facilitate or fundraise for. Well, excuse me, I have free speech rights as well. So they said in Citizens United that money is speech, right? So if money is speech, I can give my money to an abortion fund, or to a woman who needs an abortion, or to the doctor doing it, because money is speech. And that's what you said. Well, we all know that laws apply differently, whether you're, General Motors or Dianne Post. I mean, the laws apply differently, which they shouldn't, but we know that they do. But that free speech issue is being raised and will be raised. And also the issue of what can you tell people about healthcare? Well, that brings up a free speech issue as well. If the opposition can stand out there and scream lies, and if those fake crisis pregnancy centers can tell lies about healthcare and about pregnancy and about birth, then surely we have the free speech right to tell the truth. This issue should have been litigated some time ago when those provisions went in the law, and there they are, but that's going to be a litigated issue as well. Now, we know also, some of us truly believe that this is a violation of our religious rights. And two cases that I know of so far have been filed. One, the Satanic Temple, and the other is a rabbi in Florida. Because this particular ruling that life begins at contraception is a belief of one religion. It's not philosophical, medical, it's not the belief of any other religion, it's one particular religion. So by making it the national law, what you are saying is the rest of us have to abide by the religion that we don't agree with. So you are violating our freedom of religion by forcing us to act in a way that is contrary to our beliefs. So these are issues that are also being litigated. Some of us have been trying for some years to get the abortion litigation attorneys to look at these issues and to focus on these issues, but they would not, because they thought they were losers. Well, okay, we've lost now, so now you have to take a different direction here, because, we need a different direction. So that's the quick and dirty of where the criminal law is. And there is, of course, a rally tonight at 7:00 down at the Capitol. And there's various events in Tucson. If somebody put it in the chat, I saw that there's also one in Tucson. So do we have any questions in the chat? Janie, have you been watching it for questions?
I haven't seen any yet, but if there are any, please go ahead and type them in. One other thing to note, they discussed the climate that may be, present at the Capitol. And so this is not an event for you and your children to come to, because it's so late at night too. They just want everybody to be very aware that, when it's time to go, it's time to go, and to not, there are likely going to be counter protesters there. So make sure that you de-escalate, don't get in anybody's face. And
do not talk to them. Do
No.
not talk to them. You cannot talk any sense into them. It's like talking to a drunk person. You only get angry and they don't get anything except making you angry. Do not talk to them at all.
Right. And again, this isn't one that you're going to bring your children to. So be mindful of that. So I see one question, and I think that Lindsay's already answered it. Which lawsuits by which religious groups? You've already answered that one, right?
Satanic Temple, she put that link in there, but there also was one, and I don't have more detail. I know it's a rabbi in Florida. That's all I've been able to find so far, has filed a lawsuit because it's against Jewish law.
Yeah. And I'm
So
sure we'll see more of those, right?
yeah, and Jeannie, you mentioned the panel of religious leaders that is coming up, and there are going to be a wide spectrum of different religions represented because this does not comport with their religious belief. And yet they're being forced by this theocratic Supreme Court that we have, which is not supreme and is not even a court. It is a bunch of political hacks. And they've lost, as far as I'm concerned, all of their credibility. They have absolutely no credibility left. And what Sotomayor once said, can the court survive the stink of these decisions that they had? The one, guns everywhere, and today's decision, no, it can't survive the stink. It's very clear what's going on, that it is completely political and completely partisan.
We do have a question here from, I don't know if it's Tamara or Tamara. I'm concerned and wish to draw attention to pregnant women with health emergency. Are there doctors that refuse an abortion no matter what? Are doctors, OBGYNs going to refuse abortions out of fear in AZ? I mean,
Right
yeah,
now, they already are refusing abortions out of fear in AZ. The problem is also going to be, what if a pregnant woman starts hemorrhaging, starts bleeding, she's having a miscarriage, she goes to the hospital, there's going to be probably some nasty person there who will call the police and will report that she had a self-managed abortion when it was nothing but a miscarriage. And that has happened. There was a woman in El Salvador, spent 7 years in prison, alleged to have done a self-managed abortion when she didn't. All she had was a miscarriage. But that's also happened in the United States. I just saw some article a couple of days ago, and I do think it was in Texas, actually, where the woman was arrested when she was because she had a miscarriage. There was quite a stiff penalty, of course, but as it turned out, they've now overturned it, and they got medical expertise, blah, blah, and they did not. Oh, they dropped the charges against her. But this is already happening in the United States.
right.
Yeah, somebody brought up the initiative. The initiative is ongoing. Yeah, and there's a lot of signatures needed. So you do need all hands on deck. Last night in a discussion, Chris Mays says she thought that if we don't get the initiative passed this time, it certainly would pass 2 years from now, when there's time enough to gather all of the signatures, because the majority of people in Arizona, the majority of Republicans, the majority of Catholics believe abortion should be safe and legal.
Right.
An article on the lawsuit. Okay, great. Thank you, Karen.
There's also in the Q&A, this is from Guadalupe Clark. She asks, do you see the option of doctors on ships offering their services as they will be doing in Ireland?
Yes, that's been discussed as well. Having the offshore ship option, that has been discussed. Yes, I believe that will happen here for the state, for the states that are on the coastline. Well, Carolyn, the problem with waiting 2 years, they could make it even worse. Well, let's not let them make it worse. Let's change over the legislature and the governor in November. I mean, even heightens the importance of how we have to do this. Oh, okay. So Tamara's asking about the life of the mother and the baby. Okay, here's the problem with this. The 1164 law that was signed this year by Ducey. Well, he and Bartow were fighting about which law goes into effect, his or the old ones. Well, the old ones, as I told you, are under injunction. His would be 90 days, but it does not say for rape, incest, or the health or life of the mother. There's no exception for that. The only exception is medical emergency. What is a medical emergency? Nobody knows. This is the issue when you use new terms like this that are not familiar in the law or already described and defined in the law, then you don't know what it means. So a woman could go to one doctor and this is happening, and the doctor says, yes, this is a medical emergency, and the pregnancy. She could have the same situation, go to a different doctor who says, no, this is not a medical emergency. and the prosecutors could prosecute one or both of them. And the decision of what a medical emergency means is going to come a few years down the road in legal decisions. So we don't know what that means, but they do not have an exception for rape, incest, or the life or health of the mother. And in Missouri had a trigger ban, and so immediately it's illegal in Missouri right now, no exception for rape or incest in Missouri.
And I vaguely remember when this was being heard in committee, the 1164 bill, that they would have to assemble like a review committee or a medical review board or something like that.
Yeah,
So
ethics board.
I mean, so like, I just think about, what do you call it? Like a placental eruption or whatever it's called, abruption, like something that it's seconds. It's literally, to expect there to be an semblance of some medical review board. What if it happens on a Sunday? Like it's completely unrealistic.
Well, that was discussed last night by one of the doctors, and she said that, I mean, they do have what they now call ethics committees, and that perhaps those will have to be ginned up to be the deciders. But yes, that is what they did. You had to go to that committee and you had to have a vote. The doctor who was dealing with you had to then go in front of that committee, and then they had to vote as to whether that doctor knew what he was talking about and whether it met the requirements.
And I would just like to point out too, this is the party of small government. It's
Right.
not true. The party of local control, not true. The party of fiscal conservancy, not true. None of those things apply anymore. And this is a radical extremist, white Christian nationalist agenda that's playing out right in front of our very eyes. Let's see what else. From my perspective, the combined effect of the gun law struck down yesterday and then today's decision is essentially creating targets out of children. Apparently firearm target manufacturers have a shortage. Boy. Yeah. So
that decision yesterday terrifies me. I mean, none of us are safe. No one of us is safe. And they're just turning us back to the Wild West when everybody walked around with a 6-gun on their hip. And isn't that why we got police? So that everybody wouldn't be walking around and shooting each other in bar fights and things like that. And the governor of New York, I heard him this morning because that's the law that they overturned. They're meeting in special session to come up with a new law. And he said, we don't want every argument to turn into a shootout. And that's what happens. And you have young people, you have alcohol, you have guns. I mean, what could go wrong, really?
Okay, so I see one more question. Anyway, speaking of that, like what Alex said about the guns and about, and Dianne saying we're not safe anywhere. And now the placement of these flags back again at the Capitol. These are all things that are connected. And we should all be very concerned right now. We should all be vigilant. And it's a heck of a lot more than just voting. Anybody can just vote. We need way more than that right now.
And Jeannie, this Paula talked about the decision to letting taxpayer dollars go to religious schools. Is that going to be a topic that you're going to cover later?
Yeah, I spoke with Dawn Penich-Stacker earlier today, and we both agreed that right now, because of today's decision, that this was the conversation that we needed to have. It could very well be next week that we have the school voucher discussion, and we'll also do a budget breakdown, I'm sure, at that point too, because we're looking at sine die here. As a matter of fact, I know that the Senate is on the floor right now discussing the voucher expansion again, because it had to come back here to the House, to the Senate. So unless there's anything else.
I don't think Jeannie's background noise can be muted because she's in the Capitol. She's in the Senate. Yeah. So anyway, we're done anyway, because where are people going to go now?
Well, I'm not really great with Twitter Spaces, but I know that Chris Love and Julie Gunnigal are going to be having a Twitter Space discussion. So I recommend, if you do have Twitter, that's where you're going to want to get in on that discussion, because they will likely be able to break it down even further and get into more detail and talk about, why this election cycle is so very important. So thanks for putting all the stuff in there. I do have to get back to it right now. I appreciate you, Diane, for breaking all this down for us, and everybody just stay safe out there because we're living in some crazy times. Take care,
Yeah.
everybody.
Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.